Yeah, well, I think it comes back, Dominic, to what I was saying earlier on. When I was 18 years of age and I decided to go into the seminary, a lot of people would say to me when they would ask me now about, oh, when did you go in for the priesthood? And I'd say, well, I went in, when I was 18. I'd say, God, that was a very young time to be a priest. And of course, I wasn't a priest at 18. I was entering, I suppose, a journey of discernment, So, like with so many things in life, Dominic, I suppose it's a matter of being open and taking that step and having the courage to take that step. Thanks, Father Alan. I appreciate it so much. And again, Helen, thanks so much for your invitation. It's lovely to be here, I must say. As I say, I met Helen a number of weeks ago when I was welcomed into the Diocese of Dublin, and we said that I'd pop down sometime. So really delighted to see you all and to meet with you, and we'll have a cup of tea and a bit of cake later on to meet in I suppose, a more informal way. I was just sort of thinking to myself, it's my first time to kind of meet with you and all the rest. So I thought rather than maybe just giving a talk about something, I said maybe I'd just share a little bit of my own story. Okay, just because maybe you don't hear too much. Like sometimes people start to think bishops or priests fall out of the sky or something like that. But actually we have a life story. Now, when I'm talking about life story, I'm not going to tell you everything because we're here for the night. But just to hit on maybe the important points along the journey. And maybe before we begin, we might just begin with a prayer. We've prayed with the Lord in a very special way there over the last half an hour, and we've had the Eucharist. So we thank the Lord for his presence with us. We ask the Lord to be present with us now in this little sharing. And I often find myself that it's not me, but maybe the Spirit speaking through me or whatever, that maybe there's something that I'll say tonight might touch the heart of someone here. And we pray that the Spirit might be alive in that. And whatever it maybe is to touch your heart, or that you might remember, maybe the Spirit is in that, and that you might be open to that as we go from here tonight as well. And we pray God's blessing upon us all now as we gather on this special evening as friends and as a community of faith. So just to go back, I'm 53 years of age, so I'm actually, as I understand it, the youngest bishop in Ireland still. I've been the youngest bishop for the last 4 years, so the baby bishop, as they call me, in Ireland. So I was born in a place called Carlow. Okay, so Carlow's not that far from Dublin. It's just down the N7 really. You head down that direction, and I was born into a very normal family. My mum and dad are dead now, but I'm the youngest in my family. So I have a brother and I have 2 sisters, and then I came in as the youngest. And when I look back at my life, sometimes I kind of wonder, I don't know whether, Alan, this is like with you, sometimes you wonder, how in the name of God did I end up in the priesthood or go on for how did it all start kind of thing? And I go back actually to my childhood. Now, my parents weren't theologians, far from it. They were very normal, ordinary people. My father came from business people, my mother came from farming background. And there's kind of 3 things I remember from my childhood that I think are very significant, and some of you might identify with this yourselves. I think they're significant on my faith journey and why I'm actually standing here tonight as a priest and as a bishop. The first thing I remember is that we always went to Mass on a Sunday. That was really important for us. And a significant thing for us, I don't know again whether some of you can identify with this, but on a Saturday night in my home, what would happen is you'd have your bath on a Saturday night. That time, believe it or not, we didn't have daily showers and all that kind of thing. So your bath on a Saturday night was really important. And then your good clothes, as we used to call them, your Sunday best, would be put out, ready for Sunday morning. Okay, and then obviously you'd go off to Mass with your family, you'd be at Mass, and then you'd come back, and it was normally the Sunday dinner together as well, the Sunday roast, and it was a lovely sense of family, I suppose, when I think about it. But looking back, as a child now, Saturday night was special. You got your bath, and your good clothes were put out. So in a sense, there was a significant message coming through to me as a child that what was happening on Sunday morning was important. That was I didn't realise it at the time, but that was the message that was coming across. So that was significant, I think, in the early stages of my faith journey. The second thing I remember is that when I would be going to bed as a child at night, my mum or my dad would bring me up to tuck me in when I was just a little nipper now, a real youngster. And we'd say a little prayer, when I'd be getting into bed. And it was a simple little prayer. It might be, God bless Mammy, God bless Daddy, God bless my brother and my sisters, God bless the dog, the usual thing, whatever. But again, that sense of prayer was important. And the lovely little prayer to my guardian angel, I think was the first prayer I ever learned. My mother taught me that prayer. And then the simple prayers like the Hail Mary, the Our Father, they seem simple. They're not simple, obviously, but they were important. So that sense of prayer. That was the second thing. So Mass prayer. And the third thing I remember, again, which was very significant, was I used to see my mother praying, kneeling by her bedside in the morning. She had a little black prayer book. I don't know what was in the prayer book or anything like that, but I used to see her physically kneeling by her bedside, and she would be praying from her prayer book. And again, as a child, I used to see that. And I think the witness of that was really important. So they're the kind of three things, as simple as that. Went to Mass on a Sunday, said my little prayers as a child, and I used to see my mother praying by her bedside in the morning. That's where the seeds of faith were sown in my life. It wasn't from some big complicated theological book or anything like that. And I think just coming back to the third thing there of my mother saying her prayers and me witnessing that as a child, I say that particularly here this evening in your presence, and it's a great privilege for me to be here tonight in your presence this evening. And again, I really appreciate your invitation. And I genuinely mean that. Because, your witness, you might not realise, my mother didn't realise the witness she was being before me. She probably didn't even realise I saw her praying, but I did. So, sometimes witness, you mightn't realise the power that you have in witnessing before others. And again, as pure in heart, that's really important in today's society and in today's church. So to thank you for that witness as well, I think is very, very important. And never underestimate it, because you never know whose heart you might be touching, that you mightn't even realise it, like my own mother was in my own case. So that was kind of the seeds of faith that were sown. So I wanted to be a guard. I wanted to be a policeman. That was what all I wanted to be. And we moved from Carlow to a town called Athy in County Kildare. And in Athy at the time, there were two churches. There was the parish church, St. Michael's, and there was the Dominican church. It was a most unusual church, a really modern church. It was built in the early 60s. Very radical at the time. It was even radical in later years. Now, unfortunately, it's no longer a church. It's a library now. But in my time, when I was a young fella, it was a church. And we used to go to the Dominicans every Saturday evening, Alan. You'd be delighted to hear this. We didn't go to the parish church. We went to the Dominicans. And I was 11 years of age, wanting to be a guard, wanting to be a policeman, as I say. And I remember there was a 6:15 Mass in the Dominicans. And my mother was one of these people that we'd have to go really early to Mass because she'd want to get a seat down towards the back of the church. Typical Irish person, sit down at the back. So we were sitting down the back, and maybe about 15, 20 minutes before Mass, that was grand. Then the priest came out to say Mass, and I remember that priest, and I remember his name. Father Ray O'Donovan was his name, and I met him years later afterwards, but he was the man who was saying the Mass. And I remember being at that Mass that night, and everything was going grand. I probably didn't even realise what he was saying or anything like that, because I was only a child. I was only 11, actually. That was the age I was 11. And I remember looking up at him, and something came over me. I don't know what that was. I can't explain it. To this day, I can't explain it. But something hit me during Mass. And I remember looking up at Father O'Donovan and saying, there's something about what he's doing that I want to do with my life. And that was the seed of my vocation to the priesthood, because that thought never ever left me afterwards. From that moment on. I was 11 years of age. And I remember saying it to my mother. And my mother was a very wise woman. And she didn't kind of praise it, or she didn't knock it or whatever. She was very wise. She didn't want to influence me one way or the other. And she just kept very, very quiet and calm about it. But anyway, it was something that stayed with me during my secondary school years. I didn't say it very loudly to anybody or whatever, but it was there all of the time. I did my Leaving Cert early enough. I was 17 years of age when I did my Leaving Certificate. That's, as most of you would know here, is the final exam. In fact, the kids are getting their results tomorrow of the Leaving Cert. And I was only after turning 17, so I was very young. But this thought about the priesthood was still there. But I felt at 17 I was too young to go into the seminary. So I took a year out. I worked for a year. Just worked different things. It was a great year and all sorts of things. But the niggling thing about the priesthood kept coming back to me. So I decided to get in contact with a vocations director. We went through the talks and so on and so forth. And then if you want to go on for the priesthood nowadays, it's, you have to go through various psychological testing and all sorts of things. So I had to go through all of that. And believe it or not, I passed. I can't believe it. I got through all of that stuff. But anyway, I got through all of that stuff. And I was accepted for the priesthood. So I joined the seminary at 18 years of age. Now, a lot of people would say to me, God, that was very young to be a priest. But of course, I wasn't a priest at 18. I was only entering a discernment process to see if the priesthood was for me. But I loved my formation for the priesthood. There's great variety in the formation now. There's obviously the intellectual stuff like the theology, philosophy, all of that stuff, scripture, so on. But there's also the pastoral end of things. Like in my formation, like I worked in Dublin, in hospitals in Dublin. I worked in homeless hostels, in youth clubs, also hospitals as well, all sorts of different things. So it was a great kind of formation for life. And there was another guy actually with me, Paul was his name as well. And as we were getting near ordination, he was to be ordained with me. And he'd gone about 6 years at this stage. And in fact, we were going to be ordained together. And I remember him coming to me towards the end of his formation, and I knew it was one of these talks where he was sort of saying, look at Paul, he says, I don't think the priesthood is for me. I'm going to take another direction. Now, I was upset over that because you're very good friends in the seminary. You get to know guys very well. But I always remember something he said. He says, but I don't regret the 6 years I spent in the seminary. He says, because it's good formation for life, not just for priesthood. And I think that was a very wise thing. That he was open to the Lord in his formation. And in fact, later on, I did his wedding, and he's married now over in the west of Ireland with 2 girls. So it was lovely going back and doing the wedding. So in 1997 then came the time where I was to be ordained a priest. And I was ordained in July 1997 in the cathedral in Carlow, the cathedral town of my home diocese of Kildare and Loughlin. And it's a big moment, I studied for 8 years for the priesthood. And it's a big moment, a lovely moment and all the rest. And that was great. But you come down off the mountain very quickly, you know what I mean? You're kind of the height of the ordination in the first mass, which is lovely and it's great to celebrate and all the rest. And then you kind of wait for your first appointment. Where's the bishop going to send you, And I remember getting the phone call from the bishop on a Saturday morning to go down to see him. And going down and being very nervous and all the rest, and knocking on the door. He opened the door. Bishop Larry Ryan was his name. He's gone to his eternal reward now since as well. And I went in, and he said he was sending me to Clane. Now, Clane is at that time, it was a kind of a village near Maynooth in County Kildare. Some of you might know of Maynooth. And, sorry? In Clongowes, indeed. Yeah, absolutely. Clongowes is in the parish of Clane. There was the big festival there over the weekend. So I went to Clane. Now, I remember moving in to Clane. Now, I never lived on my own before. So when I was moving into the house in Clane, I was moving into a little bungalow. And I remember the first night moving, it was an August evening, moving into the house. There was a few bits and pieces that were moved into the house, guys that were helping me with it. And when they were finished, off they went. And I remember closing the door of the house behind me. And what struck me was there wasn't a sound in the house. Not a sound. There's no television or anything like that. You know what I mean? This is all new to me, like. And I remember thinking to myself, Paul, you've made the biggest mistake of your life. And that was a scary moment, I can tell you. Here I was ordained now, you know. You move that transition from being a student to seminarian, now you're a priest. And August is a quietish enough time in parish because the schools are closed and so on and so forth. So, I wasn't too sure, what I was supposed to do and all the rest. I was only getting used to how to say mass and all of that kind of thing. Anyway, making a long story short, September started up, schools opened up. My ministry and service to people started up in relation to the weddings, the funerals, the baptisms, as I say, the sacramental life of the parish and all of the rest. And I absolutely loved it. Absolutely loved it. Loved the buzz of parish, meeting people. you know, it's one thing that I've learned about ministry. You know, you're coming out of seminary, you've done a lot of study and a lot of experience of different ministries and so on. But what you learn from the richness of people's experience is very, very powerful. And God is in the midst of that. God is in the midst of that. And I've learned so much from people on my journey of life and faith. And you have very special moments that you never dreamed that you would have. You know what I mean? That God brings you into those moments with people on their life story, which is a great privilege, you know. So I was 7 years in Clane and loved, as I say, every minute of it. And I suppose the most difficult part of my priesthood was the times where you'd be moving from a parish. And I remember my first move, I had to leave Clane, and you leave all the people you know and all the experience and all this, and then you start off in another parish. And I remember going into Kildare was my second parish, Kildare town. And I remember feeling a little bit sorry for myself going down through Kildare the first morning, feeling a bit lonely, you know, didn't know anybody in Kildare and missing Clane and so on. And I remember walking down along the street, my head was literally down. I remember going along, I remember meeting a woman, and I looked up at her, and she says, "You must be Father Paul," she says. And I said, "I am." She said, "You're really welcome to the parish. We're delighted to have you." And she said it with a big smile on her face, and on she went. She gave me such a lift in that moment. Again, an insight. A smile and a hello to somebody can give somebody a lift for a long time. It was a moment I still remember, and that's over 20 years ago, you know. So always remember that. You never know how a simple gesture can, you know, really give somebody a lift, because it gave me a lift, I can tell you. Then I got into other areas of ministry as well. Again, areas that I never thought I would be involved with. I was appointed to look after youth ministry in Kildare and Loughlin Diocese. I was also appointed as vocations director for the diocese. And an area I certainly didn't think I'd ever get involved in was local media. So I was writing for local newspapers, and then I also got involved in local radio, KFM radio. And I used to have an hour-long show every Sunday morning on radio. And I remember, now this is the training I got. You see Harry there with his equipment there and all the rest. The training I got for radio was, I went into the studio, it was recorded, the first show was recorded, first two shows were recorded. I went in, nervous as hell, and I remember the technicians behind the kind of counters, you know, with all these buttons that they push up and down and all this kind of thing. I hadn't a clue of any of that, just sitting in the thing with a microphone in front of me, and I hadn't guests coming in, and they just said, "We're going with this as if it's live, that's it." That was the training I got for media, so it was. But anyway, it was a great way to get used to, I suppose, reaching out to that wider audience on radio and so on, and get the experience of all that thing of red lights and studios and microphones and stuff like that, because, you know, the whole area of communication is so important in the life of the church, and it's important that we're comfortable in that arena, that we're able to reach out to people through that medium is really, really important. The youth ministry as well. I was on several World Youth Days. I was in Toronto in 2002. I was in Cologne. I was in Sydney. I was in Krakow. So I had many World Youth Day experience and journeyed with young people all along the way. Eventually then I went on to be a curate in Naas, and then I went on to Newbridge in County Kildare. And again, I accompanied the Dominicans are present in Newbridge as well. And many of you will know Father John Harris, I'm sure. So Father John was prior in the Dominican college, and I was parish priest of the parish. So John and I journeyed together for a number of years when we were in Newbridge, and we got on very, very well, and we had a lovely time together. In fact, when I meet John now, or when John meets me, we often refer back to our time when we were in Newbridge. Lovely parish, friendly parish. I was loving every minute. I was parish priest there in Newbridge. It's a very big parish, you know, it's a huge parish, one of the biggest in the country, and I was loving every minute of it. And it came to December 2019. It was before COVID. We were hearing a little bit about COVID over in China somewhere, but it wasn't really going to affect us as we thought. But it was December 2019, and I was after saying the 9:30 Mass in St. Connett's Church in Newbridge. And I came in, and I was finishing off a few Christmas cards. This is the 16th of December. I always remember the date. So it was very close to Christmas. I was finishing off a few Christmas cards when the phone went. And I picked up the phone. I said, "Hello." And he says, "Hello, is that Father Paul?" And I said, "It is." He said, "This is Judo Colo here, the Papal Nuncio. I would like to speak with you." Now, it's not often I'd be stuck for words, but I can tell you, I was flummoxed. Yeah. And I would like to speak with you today or tomorrow. And I said, God, I'm not going to wait until tomorrow. So I said, okay, I could see you this afternoon. That's fine. So we arranged to meet that afternoon up here in Dublin in the Nunciature on the Navan Road. And I had to go out with a group of people from the parish that morning for a cup of coffee over. They were finishing up. There's a share food project in the parish, and they were finishing up for Christmas. So they invited me to go out for a cup of coffee. So I went out with my brain scrambled. I said, what is this about? I said, it couldn't be anything to do with being a bishop, and I guess that wouldn't be into my thing at all. So it must be he wants me to go on a commission or something like that. So up I went to Dublin that afternoon to the Navan Road, and I remember driving into the Nunciature, never have been there before obviously, and rang the doorbell, and the nuncio opened the door, and we went into a big sitting room, and he sat on a couch there and I sat on a couch here, been very polite and small talk initially, and then he said, I'm sure you're wondering what all of this is about. And I said, absolutely. And he said, you probably think you're going to be put on a commission. And I said, yes, I do, actually, you know. He said, there's a little bit more to it than that. And I said, oh, God, there's something coming here. He says, Pope Francis has appointed you as Bishop of Conry. And all I remember was him kind of laughing, because I'd say my face just fell, you know what I mean? Because I really wasn't expecting this, nor did I want this, and I can assure you of that. So I remember asking, well, when do you want a response? And he said, by tomorrow. So I said, okay. So anyway, I left stunned. I was absolutely stunned. I'm a very good sleeper. I've slept through leaving cert exams, I've slept through driving tests, I've slept through everything and anything. But I can assure you, I had a sleepless night that night. And I say that because I was very conscious that if I say yes, it was going to change my life in a very radical way, you know. Firstly, I was going to have to leave Newbridge, which I loved, and I loved every minute of it there. And I was going to have to go to a different part of the country that I wasn't familiar with. And then I also thought that, you know, people's perception of you kind of changes when you become a bishop, you know. So all of these things were going through my mind. And I actually phoned him the next day, and I did ask him for more time. And he did give me another couple of days. So again, torturous couple of days when I had to think and reflect and pray about this, because you're not allowed to say it to anybody else. So I had to pray about it and think about it very deeply. I thought of Pope Francis during that time. I was thinking, like, you know, he was about to retire in Buenos Aires in Argentina. He comes over for the conclave. And just as he's about to retire, he's voted in by the cardinals, by the Spirit, by the Holy Spirit, to become the Holy Father. And he accepted that. And I was thinking to myself, well, if Pope Francis can take that all upon his shoulders of that responsibility, and if he has the confidence that he wants to appoint me as a bishop, then maybe I should say yes to the call. So I got back to the nuncio and I said, okay, I accept the appointment. And then you're not allowed to say it to anybody until it's publicly announced. So all over Christmas, I kind of knew this was happening, but I didn't say it to my family. No, in my family, nobody knew. My sister, one of my sisters said to me, it's amazing how family kind of know, said to me, is there something up with you, Paul? There's something not right about you over Christmas. No, I'm grand, you know, it's the usual thing, you know, sort of that an Irish person would say. So anyway, towards the end of January 2020, it was announced publicly in the cathedral over in a place called, of all names, Ballahadreen. It's a great name, over in County Roscommon. It's a small diocese, a rural diocese over in the west of Ireland, covering a little bit of Roscommon, Mayo and Sligo. So a very different part of the country from what I was used to. Then COVID hit. I was to be ordained bishop on the 30th of April 2020, but because of COVID, it had to be postponed. So it went back to August the 30th, 2020. We were still in the midst of COVID at that stage. So there was only 50 people at my ordination as a bishop in this huge big cathedral. But they were looking in via the internet and so on. So I felt great support in that. But again, it was another chapter, another beginning in my life. Having left a number of parishes and ministries, here it was a new beginning, a new chapter in my life, a very different chapter. You see, you train to be a priest, but you don't train to be a bishop. You know, you're ordained a bishop and away you go, like, you know what I mean? There's no actual training for it as such. So I had to get to know the priests and the people, which I did, and they were most welcoming and most kind to me. So very much trying to set up parish pastoral councils and parishes, finance committees, trying to get lay involvement more in the diocese, getting around, visiting parishes, visiting schools, doing the confirmations. It was a wonderful experience, a very positive experience. But the church at the moment in Ireland is undergoing a reconfiguration. And the smaller diocese, the Conwy diocese is a very small diocese. In fact, its population wasn't much bigger than the parish I was in Newbridge, but it was made up of very small parishes. And there's been a lot of discussion about the realignment of dioceses and all the rest. So in the last number of months, a lot of discussion was going on, as a beginning anyway, looking at the west, the church in the west of Ireland. And out of that, they're uniting a couple of dioceses. So the Archdiocese of Tuam and Killala are kind of being married together, and the diocese I was at Conwy, is being married with the Diocese of Elphin. So as the start, there's also Galway and Clonfert are kind of being married together as well. So out of that, I was asked, would I come to Dublin as an auxiliary bishop, which I was glad to say absolutely, because I've always said yes to an appointment. I've never turned down an appointment. I've always said yes. And as I look back, it has always worked out. We can all start off in a chapter in our lives and have all sorts of fears, like my fears about going over to the west of Ireland or being a bishop or something like that. You can have all sorts of fears, and you can talk yourself out of it if you want, unless you hand it over and say, look, Lord, this is bigger than me. I'm handing it over to you, and leave it in his hands. And what I have found is that has worked, because there's a plan there somewhere that we don't see. And that's the same for every single one of us, So I just started in Dublin a couple of months ago, 2 or 3 months ago. Again, it's kind of it was a quiet time, July, August, a little bit quieter. I notice the diary is getting a lot busier now. Dublin is a whole different ballgame. It's a huge diocese, a huge number of priests, many of them retired or maybe in nursing homes, but a huge number of priests at the same time. So I've the privilege and the honour of serving the priests and the people and the religious and the deacons of the Archdiocese of Dublin. And there are many challenges in Dublin, of course there are. We all know that. But there's great things happening in Dublin too. And I've been in different parishes every weekend since I came here. And there's fantastic things happening, really positive things. In fact, I'd say one of the challenges is to get the good news out there. Even the likes of being here tonight with yourselves, what I mean? It's fantastic. It's great to see it. I think there's a great richness in so many people coming to our country as well. I see that in the parishes all around the diocese that I'm visiting. The great life and energy and richness that's bringing to our parishes, which is so much appreciated and gives me great heart and great hope for the future as well. So we thank God for that as well. But as I say, as I look back over my life, I suppose I'm not a rich man, but I've had a rich life, in the priesthood. And I love being a priest and I love being a bishop. You hear so much criticism around it. And I've come through a very difficult time in the church in Ireland. We all know that. And yet the roots of the church at the local level are so strong, you know what I mean? And that relationship of the local priest with their people is still very strong in Ireland. We don't hear about that, we don't see it, but it is very strong. And I've experienced that myself as a priest in many parishes. I was in 4 different parishes. So I thank God for that. So that's basically my story. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know where we go from here. I don't know what's going to happen to the Diocese of Dublin with all of its challenges and maybe the falling number of priests and so on and so forth. In fact, that was lovely, the little piece, Helen, that you read during our adoration. You know what I mean? The Lord himself says, well, don't worry about tomorrow. You know what I mean? Just work away as today, and, the Lord is in charge of tomorrow. And that's the same for us all on our own personal stories as well. So maybe out of that, what I'd be inviting yourselves again to look at in your own lives is, to look back sometimes along your journey, and to see where the Lord has touched your life. I can see so many people and so many experiences I've had as a priest and as a bishop down through the years where I really believe the Lord was at work. I didn't see it at the time, or I didn't know it at the time, but he was there. There's an Irish poet called Patrick Kavanagh, and he was from a kind of very rural part of Ireland, County Monaghan. And he said, God is present in the bits and pieces of our everyday lives. And I love that. He's just present in the ordinary bits and pieces of our lives. But that's very profound as well, to see him and to experience him in the bits and pieces of our everyday lives. And I come back to what I was mentioning during Mass as well, as just as a final thought. The image of God, and our image of God is really, really important. What image we work out of. If God is kind of that one watching over us, wanting to punish us if we make a mistake or whatever, that's, that can be very difficult. But if you believe in a loving God who challenges us, but is there with his merciful love always for us, that really throws a different perspective on life and on faith. So it's an important, that was a big, I suppose, point in my life. I remember when I was in formation, working on my image of God. So that's really, really important that we look at that and examine that on our own journey. So thanks a million for listening. As I say, just to share my story, that's my story. As I say, I came out of a very normal family, and they are a very normal family. They're far from perfect and all of the rest. But it goes back to the very simple beginnings of the going to Mass on Sunday, the saying the little prayers at night with my mother or my father, God rest them, and also seeing my mother praying, the witness of her prayer in my life. That was the rootedness of my faith, and that's the rootedness of why I'm here this evening. So reflect on your own stories and see where the Lord has touched you on your own journey as well. So thanks a million. Well done. Good. Okay, is there any questions, by the way? There's no problem at all, yeah?
We usually have questions.
Yeah, no bother at all. Sure, yeah?
How does becoming bishop affect your faith, your relationship with Jesus, or how you regard the apostles?
Yeah, I suppose at times you'd be kind of hit with the responsibility, you know what I mean, of being a bishop today, and the challenges certainly in our own culture in Ireland, you'd be hit by that. And I would be very conscious of that. You know what I mean? That we are carrying on the apostolic mission in the life of the church, and that is a real kind of a weighty responsibility. But I would refer sometimes to St. John Paul II. His motto as a bishop was "Totus tuus," all yours. He used to hand over his life to our Blessed Lady. I'm all yours, and in a sense, that's what I need to do on my own faith journey, my own life as a priest and a bishop, is to trust in God, to hand over to God, to hand over to Our Lady and say, look, I'm only an instrument. You know what I mean? The church doesn't depend on me. I'm only an instrument. The church is Christ's. You know what I mean? I'm only a servant. So I try to keep those things in mind when maybe the weight of responsibility is there, Yeah. Yeah, sure. Dominic, yeah?
What would your advice be to someone who's discerning their vocation?
Yeah, well, I think it comes back, Dominic, to what I was saying earlier on. When I was 18 years of age and I decided to go into the seminary, a lot of people would say to me when they would ask me now about, when did you go in for the priesthood? And I'd say, well, I went in, when I was 18. I'd say, God, that was a very young time to be a priest. And of course, I wasn't a priest at 18. I was entering, I suppose, a journey of discernment, So, like with so many things in life, Dominic, I suppose it's a matter of being open and taking that step and having the courage to take that step. And who knows where that will lead. It's like that guy, my friend I was talking about, the other guy, Paul, like he was on the journey through the seminary for 6 years. 6 years is a substantial amount of time in somebody's life. But he never looked on that as being wasted or whatever. It was formation for life. He got to know himself. He learned a lot about theology, philosophy. He was involved in pastoral work. So he grew as a person and as a Christian and as a follower and as a disciple of Christ. And he's still very committed to his faith today. For me, the journey led to the priesthood. So what I would say to anybody who might be discerning or thinking about the priesthood, it's not easy now, and it probably, even though when I went into the seminary in 1989, and that might seem like an eternal time ago for many of yourselves, but it's not that long ago in overall terms. It was still a little bit unusual in my time to say that you were going forward for the priesthood. It wasn't that popular of a thing. But I am aware it is more challenging now maybe to say something like that. But in another sense, people can be very supportive as well and say, God, that's fascinating, you know what I mean? That's very interesting, and why would you want to do that or whatever? And maybe, that witness can be very powerful as well. So what I would say is, have the courage, take the step, and see where the Spirit would lead you. So that's what I would say to somebody if they were considering a vocation to priesthood or religious life. I think also to have somebody to journey with you is very important, be it a priest or someone you trust or a very faith-filled person. To walk with that person and to have that support, I think, is really important as well, and to learn from their wisdom and guidance as well. So there are just a few things, Dominic, I'd think about if somebody was saying to me about that. I don't think I've ever met any guy, in relation to priesthood now, any guy who ever regretted going into the seminary. I don't think I've ever met that, whether they went on to the priesthood or if they left. I think they've all found it an interesting experience, one way or the other. Yeah. Any other questions?
Okay.
No. Right.
Bishop Paul, we're extremely grateful
Yeah.
because we are, as you can see, a youth ministry, and Father Alan is our spiritual director. However, our group is run by young adults, so many of whom are volunteers, and they just give themselves and give their talents. And so, yes, you probably heard of our ministry, that it's about sharing the truth and beauty of our human sexuality. And we try to do that in many different ways. So we try to do it by, originally it started as going into schools, so going to religion classes and sharing this beautiful message, this freeing message. And we'd always speak to young people with love and compassion, and we'd always start with kind of ground zero, talk to them, what is love? Ask them basic questions, what is freedom? And we slowly build up in them their identity, that they're precious, that they're indispensable, unrepeatable, irreplaceable. And then they start to see that they deserve to be treated this way. And so then we bring in relationships, and then we speak about the beauty of finding someone who shares the values and willing to uphold your dignity and to practice chastity. And so we try to speak in that sort of a, I suppose, positive and the witness of the young people, of us when we come to schools. So at the moment, Harry and I, we would go to the schools wherever we can, wherever they invite us. And so it's usually the witness that inspires young people, that we're just open, we're transparent, we know what they went through, we went through it ourselves, and we're trying to give them an alternative. And we always leave it up to them. They can choose, or they may choose not to, but at least they know that there's an option to live differently.
Yeah.
And so, as we see there, times have changed, so we need to evolve. So we've evolved, and we're doing Teen Day retreats. So we're actually having an upcoming one next Saturday.
Great.
Here in this building. And we did one in Cork, we did one in Galway. So we try different places. Now we got actually an email today, a lady in the north says, can you do one in the north? So we can see that amongst Catholic families, that there are families, parents who desire their children to hear this message. And if their children don't go to the schools to hear it, or if their school can't, may be a challenge for them to have us to come in, this is the hope that they can come and get at least a taster with the retreat, with the retreat, Teen Day retreats. So we try to branch out and try different ways, and also Radio Maria and the YouTube and different kind of blogs and articles, and the prayer group. So the prayer group, I suppose, is the bedrock, is the foundation. So before all the mission started, this is where it started. It was the prayer, it was the community, it was the unity of the youth praying together, trying to see where does God want, what does he want us to do. And then obviously it's our mother, as you said as well, told us to us, our mother and John Paul II, who gave us from the ground up. So we have, it's just a little token from all of us, from Pure in Heart. So, because our ministry is about theology of the body. At the moment, the big man behind theology of the body is Christopher West. You may know him. So we've been very blessed. We were able to visit the Institute, Theology of the Body Institute in Philadelphia. Great. And so he gave us a couple of the copies of his new book, Eating the Sunrise, Meditations on the Liturgy and Our Hunger for Beauty. So we just want to give you a little token so you can have something for safekeeping from
Lovely.
us.
Thanks a million, Helen. You're so good. That's fantastic. Well done. Yeah, look, and as I was mentioned there earlier in relation to my mother, Helen, what I was saying about, that was the very point, the witness of her praying. She didn't realise it, but your witness in your own ministries is very powerful. You never know whose heart you're touching I mean, you might never even realize it, you know. And I say the power of prayer, which has to be behind any of our ministries, whether it's my ministry or your ministry or anybody's ministry here or life here in the room. You know, the power of prayer, you know, the Lord is with us. He walks with us every step of the journey. And to spend time with him and to draw life from him is what it's all about. And to trust that everything is in his hands, not in ours, okay? So well done. I really appreciate that and I'll treasure that. Thank you so much. Well done. Good.